Excellent. So I think all of the councillors that should be here are here. Councillor Hamill is not with us today, so he sent his apologies. So I'm happy to move an apology. If I can get a seconder, Councillor Taylor. Thank you. See, we looked into the future and it happened. All in favour? Carried. Councillors, firstly, we're all going to be really nice today to Robin, who is just settling into the new system. On page 3 of our agenda, there are small stars beside the words, now not beside the numbers, which indicate that an item is starred. Councillor Gates has asked before the meeting to unstar 6.1. I'm interested in unstarring 6.3. Has anybody else got any items that they would like to have unstarred? Councillor McDonald is currently unstarred. So it's the little asterisks. So councillors, that would leave us with, as starred items, the confirmation of the minutes, 5.1, 6.2, 6.4, and 7.1. Would anybody like to move those? Moved Councillor Pauline Young, seconded Councillor Taylor. Are we good to go, Robin? Yep, so all in favour of moving those start items? Carried unanimously, thank you. Councillors, I haven't been notified of any conflicts of interest, but are there any conflicts of interest today? Excellent, so we'll go down to 6.1, which is nature strip, mowing policy. Councillor Gates.
Thank you. I just have a change recommendation that will be self-explanatory, and that is that Council adopts the revised nature strip footpath road verge mowing policy as amended, retaining consultation with the relevant divisional councillor. And if I have a seconder, then I'll speak to that.
Councillor Pauline Young's going to second it. So that's, yep, so that's on page 23 of the agenda.
The proposed change is on page 23.
Yep.
And the officers have kindly suggested that they remove consultation with councillors to reduce queries to our officers. But I think primarily queries about having some assistance come to our officers, and we would always like to be able to represent our community and to give them the feedback once a decision's been made. So from my point of view, it's important that we remain part of that link, and hence the proposed change to say, as amended, retaining consultation with the relevant divisional councillor.
Yep. Thank you. So, councillors, there are only a very small number of approved hardship mowing services provided in the city. There's 190, and there's a set of criteria that needs to be met, and that will continue to be met. But I suppose this is one option that the councillors would probably wish to retain to help guide officers when there is a request in that space. So is there any, and look, the officers are in furious agreement with Councillor Gates's suggestion, so which is a very safe place to be. So Councillor Gates, you're not going to close?
No, that's sufficient. Thanks,
Excellent.
officers. It's just an important link for us to go back to our community with.
Through the chair, I think the intent there was if it came through just the normal customer contact scenario, so it didn't come through the councillor's office, we wouldn't bother you. We would assess it. We would put it on the program if it met the requirements.
I actually have a view that it's actually beneficial to reach out to the divisional officers and tell them, because it actually doesn't happen a lot, but it's a nice way of knowing who's maybe being looked after in particular areas. So, okay, councillors, all in favour? I reckon that Councillor Taylor seconded that. That's right, wasn't it, Councillor Taylor?
Pauline Young did, actually.
Councillor Pauline Young did. So apparently there's no mowing on the postage stamp, yeah? So all in favour?
I just wanted to mention also that the draft actually retained the words anyway. They hadn't been removed from the draft that we were supplied. The very first paragraph said, in consultation as required with the relevant divisional councillor. So you won't need to amend anything.
Okay, so Councillor Gates scores 1 point. All in favour? Carried. So the next item is 6.3, which is the provision of two-way radio services. No, but Darren's going to grab... Yeah, grab a seat, Darren. Not the former director of... No, that's correct.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing.
Katz, do you want to say a couple of words? I've just got a couple of quick questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Our current two-way radio is end of life. We haven't replaced it for the last 20 years. There were a number of options that we considered, but ultimately we determined that using the government-wide network was the most appropriate way for the city to move forward. In particular, it allows us interoperability with emergency services. Scenarios I provide, for example, at the moment, if we have an emergency on the beach, the lifeguards have to relay through to the tower, and then that goes through to the emergency services. In the future, they will be able to choose a channel and talk immediately to ambulances, so that's obviously a significant improvement to the service. In addition, it means that we'll be able to have the command SOCs from a disaster management perspective all within the new disaster management unit, and potentially having our people on the same channels if decided. So there's an additional benefit by using that one, which is obviously also increases our number of, lessens the number of black holes we have in terms of our coverage in the city as well. So we have 3 repeater towers at the moment and a 4th one for the whole of the lifeguards. We will go to 17 by using the existing infrastructure that's already in place with the government-wide network.
Thanks, Kath. So I was interested in if you could give me an idea of how many pieces of, or how many two-way radios we're actually talking about for the city's fleet.
I will defer to Darren.
Yes, thank you. So as far as the number, we've gone through a large stakeholder and sourcing solution with all of the people that we're using this. We're going to expand our radio coverage a little bit from what we're currently using based on the business contingency plans that the Brisbane branches have decided to work on, and looking at what future disaster management might need. There's probably about 685 units all up. Now, that's not all portable radios. That will be what we call a disaster console. We'll be talking about mobile radios, in-vehicle radios, portable radios, and chargers and the like. So there'll be 680 odd pieces of equipment. Of that, I can give you the exact breakdown if required.
That's a good guide. And are they? Is it just powered like a normal fly-wide type of charge?
So there's a number of different pieces of equipment or types of use that they're going to have for that. The first one is an all portable radio. It just looks like a two-way that you might buy for your kids from Kmart, so to speak, but a lot more advanced. There'll be a number of those that will be used as normal business practice. The animal management people, for instance, use them on a daily basis, and they would need those. There'll be in-vehicle, what we call in-vehicle mounted radios, similar to what we already have in the vehicles that are currently mounted in there. And then we've gone to a new part of technology that the NAMU people have pretty much requested, that is, it's a portable radio that can fit into a charger that then converts that portable radio to a mobile radio, giving it an external antenna, greater power coverage and the like to be able to use. two things that they like about that is that, one, the portable radio is with them at all times. They don't forget it. If they haven't got the portable, they haven't got a radio. And when they're driving around the vehicle, they can mount it into this particular cradle, which one charges it, so it's always good to use. And the second is they know exactly where it is. It's not another piece of equipment floating around in the vehicle, so to speak.
And does it work on a particular channel? Like, I mean, how do you protect communications?
We have a number of channels that are at our disposal, and again, that'll be the finer points that we're going to drill down into. According to the stakeholders, for instance, and using the lifeguards as a perfect example, they have one radio tower that they broadcast on one channel from the entire length of the east coast of our strip. So if someone is in Coolangatta, they're listening to someone in Narrowneck, and so on and so on. Just for the radio, for those people in that area, if they so choose, they could have 6, 7, 8, as well as 2, 3 or 4 interoperable channels. That interoperable channel, again, as Kath alluded to, was that the emergency services, through their control function, can then talk to us directly through our radios, something that we've never been able to do ever. And again, if we've got an event on at, say, Kira, and they're running a surf carnival event, they can have an interoperable channel that works just with that, which can also work their normal business function on another channel.
Does the city operator have to be invited into that network to hear? Like, so if somebody's in the Broadwater Parklands and they reach into the buggy and borrow one of these handsets, do they have access to the QPS channel?
There is no access directly to QPS, QAS or any of the other emergency services. It is locked down to our channel or our channels that we choose to have, and each radio can be programmed to suit whichever channel is required for that user area. If we were to use the protective services people, for instance, they could have 4 or 5 channels that they may use for different areas, and if someone was to reach in and grab one, they could definitely pick it up and broadcast across our network, as they could with our current radio system now. So it's not as secure as that. You still have a physical presence where you have to make sure that the radio is secure.
And can that one piece of handset be then disabled from the system, though?
Exactly
so there's a
right.
central point which can just take it out?
So if we use this dispatch console, the disaster console that we talked about, protective service can now shut down that radio, and it can be disabled from there. It also has a built-in GPS function, so we know exactly where each of the radios are. So if someone was to pick one up out of a buggy and go for a quick jaunt down to Southport, we could be tracking that in real time.
Okay, and is it also, so it's clearly used by the Queensland Government and the Queensland Emergency Services. Is it also used by the Surf Lifesaving?
So there's the technology's only been opened up to local government in 2019. Up until that point they were still working and making sure that the leverage was only on the emergency services. Lifeguard Australia at the moment, I believe, is working on their own network currently, but they have been invited to come on to the GWN, the government-wide network. I'm not sure what their current contractual arrangements are with their current supplier, but it's been suggested that it's in their best interest to go onto that.
And are we aware of any other South East Queensland local governments that have signed on?
Yes, so the Sunshine Coast Council has recently signed on and integrated a smaller part of their radio network, mainly for the foreshores and the beaches. And Redlands Council has also just adopted the technology and be coming on board very shortly.
Thank you. Councillor Gates?
Thanks, Chairman. Some of my questions have been answered, but could I ask, given that we haven't gone to market, how can we be confident that we're getting good value for money here? Noting that the contract is for 6 years and 11 months, so nearly 7 years, and I'm presuming there'll be technological advances. So firstly, how can we be sure it's value for money? And secondly, why is the period so long, given that there may be improvements in some other form of technology?
And that's a good question, and let me answer that. The 6 years and 11 months coincides with the current contract arrangement that GWN, the government-wide network, has. The supplier of the infrastructure is Telstra. Make no mistake about that, and it is GWN that is managing that contract. The equipment supplied, radios and etc., and the technical infrastructure is Motorola, and they have taken this out. It was a 10-year contract originally by GWN, and it's now been in force for 3 years or so. So we will fall in line with that. The economies of scale by going to that same alignment is that when the new technology advances come through into the negotiation phases of what goes in 7 years, we will be able to leverage through with that and get up to date at the same time. Why we've chosen to go this way with GWN, I guess, is the fact that they have a $457 million infrastructure investment across South East Queensland and Queensland, and their R&D is phenomenal, as alluded to by the director. There was at least 17 or 12 to 17 repeater towers across the whole South East Queensland. There's 20 or 30. In the event of our 3 towers at the moment that we have, if one was to go down in the middle, if we could have one north, middle and south, if the middle one was to go down, we'd have no communication between north and south whatsoever. It is completely dead. In the GWN system, if one was to go down, it's an automatic redundancy that the next tower next to it would pick up from it. So it's a case of that we would not see a black spot in that service area. However, there is a caveat that there is a black spot in some areas because of natural terrain, high rise and the like. So,
And is it used by the Rural Fire Brigade as well?
Rural Fire Brigade used the GWN network, yes. And there was some burn off just recently when we got some radios that we've been doing some recent testing with. And I believe Howard Taylor from the NAMU section went up there and was working side by side with the Royal Fire Service to see what the requirements are, and he was quite happy with the service. The beauty again coming with GWN is if we have a natural disaster event or some other event similar to the fires that we had recently, they have these things that they deploy called cows. I don't know why they call them cows, but they call them cows. And they're a repeater station. They're about $300,000 each for these trailers that they mobilise and park up on the top of the hinterland to allow for any coverage and black spots that may encounter in that particular instance.
And do we have coverage on South Stradbroke?
Yes, we do.
And the more remote parts of the city?
If I look at the coverage map, yes, we do, and I can say that without any doubt. However, I don't leave anything to fail, so we've deployed our own radio techs from Fleet to go out and do some testing on that, which I believe they're either doing today or tomorrow. They've been doing testing across all 4 corners of the city just to see how it goes, and there was an anecdotal report from them yesterday where they were in this particular building transmitting out of the basement of this building to the top of Talabudra. And their words were the signal was ripping at 5.5.
Right.
So I assume that means good.
And does it work from Carrara? That's my asking for a friend. And is there a training package that's required, or is it plug and play and the guys can work?
The beauty of going with the GWN and a managed service that it is that they supply a number of training sessions and hours. They do, first of all, what they call a train the trainer facilitated session, where they'll train a number of change managers, if you want, change champions, who will then roll down the training as a backup from there. So it's structured in. It becomes part of the procurement process as to what we specify in that document. And having the lessons learned from going through the recent IVMS solution, we signed up for 75 or 80 hours of training just in the trainer session with IVMS, and we'd be looking for something at least the same with this.
And my final question is not dissimilar to Councillor Gates's in the context of sole supplier. I was contacted by a party who was interested and felt that they'd been very broadly maybe shut out, and I just suggested they needed to speak to procurement about that. But are you hand on heart that the sole supplier provides a better outcome than going to the market?
So to answer your question on that, there's a number of factors that we had to bring into it. The Australian Communications Media Authority, the ACMA, is the people that own the frequency we currently use. That frequency was meant to be shut down on the 30th of June this year because it's going to be repealed to another area of business that they're going to use with part of their expansions. So it's not the towers, it's not the infrastructure, it's actually the radio frequency that they own. We negotiated fairly heavily with them to get an extension. We wanted 12 months so we could go to a full-blown tender arrangement, if that be the case, so we could do a lot of market sounding. Unfortunately, the maximum extension we could get was 31st of December this year. Potentially on the 31st of December, our radio network, as we know it, will be cut down and we will no longer have it, which will impact the Animal Management Unit, the NAMU, disaster management. The lifeguards are on a separate radio channel, so they are safe for the moment. But again, that's where we had some suffer. Part of the fleet business transformation, or the fleet review that happened in 2018 to 2019 with GLG Services, they did some market sounding, and a request for information went out particularly on this, because it was on the radar that our radio system that we have is roughly 20-year-old technology, and that they wanted to know if there was something better out in the market. 6 people were contacted as part of the request for information, or 6 return come back, 4 of which have I think the word they used was a somewhat presence in the Gold Coast as to their operation, and from there it was suggested that a lot of them, 3 out of the 4, did not have the current network nor facilities or infrastructure to be able to do what we would require them to do. And again, this is GLG Services asking for this. Part of that process then was to look at what would be required. So we went to another council up the road, Brisbane Council, and had a look, and they built their own infrastructure. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but it was somewhere around $10 million to build their own infrastructure. If you understand that Roma Street and the headquarters of the police is in Brisbane, the Brisbane GWN network is far superior than the current network that the Brisbane City Council has, and they've spent $10 million to get there. We can literally jump on the back of this and we get exactly the same coverage. But due diligence is what it needs to be, and procurement and probity needs to be there. So we went through a sourcing analysis to have a look and see where we could go. We went through 3 or 4 gates to get where we were, and the options 1 and 2, one was to go to a full tender, which would be timely and costly. We both knew that. Number 2 is if we went to a localised arrangement, that we couldn't find that we'd have the right suppliers or the right equipment to build the network in the necessary time frame that we needed to do, because we're short on time. And 3 was that the network, or leveraging off a state government arrangement that was already in place, seemed to be the most, and I won't say attractive, but it was the most prudent way of doing things because of the time frames, the business impacts that were coming, and the fact that we could take it either on a capital or an operational basis. To answer the question before on technology, the radio network that's been in place for over that 10-year period the radios have been changed out once already. They have a life cycle of about 5 years, these particular radios, to make sure that they are the most advanced in the available space. So they have done already a change out at one point. The equipment is rated to be dropped underwater by 2 metres for 4 hours. So the lifeguards, if they were using them, they could use it. So the advancement is there. If we do have a problem with our radio, they simply come along, pick it up, take it away, and give us a new one. We pay for the one radio for the life of that next 6 years and 11 months, and they will continue to replace regardless. So that were the 3 areas that we had to look at. Was 1, speed the market because of the time constraints that we had. 2, what was the ability for the local infrastructure and local players to come on board with that and to meet with it. Learning the lessons from Brisbane was a case of, if we build this infrastructure, 1, we have to buy land, build off towers, resource off, etc. And then 3, we need obviously people to maintain that. So it was that was the main reasons, and we've done that in our sourcing analysis.
Thank you. What's its range out to? What's its coastal range?
Coastal range is 50 kilometres off to sea. It goes out past the 50 fathom mark quite easily. We wouldn't get anywhere near that with our canoes and jet skis, but the police have tested it to 50.
Yeah. And I suppose a question in regards to that interoperational between agencies. If there's a flood in Brisbane and the Gold Coast send crews up to Brisbane to help with flood work, the state agencies are able to use it in that context as well, so they can
exactly right, Councillor.
Identify an operator and tune them in.
It would be in a disaster or something like that. Yes, the POC in Brisbane, whoever that may be at the time, the operations centre, would then make out a direction to say everyone go to channel 23 or whatever it may be at the time, and then that would be an open channel for all of those people on that time. The radio network can go as far as Toowoomba without any problems at all, so we could talk from here to Toowoomba without an issue.
And so we started the conversation talking about 680 odd units. Is there a spare number in that fleet? So again, if there's a request for 100 somethings to go to Brisbane, we could accommodate.
So at the moment, as part of the business continuity plan, there's a lot of radios sitting around very idle across all the areas, and we've identified that. But it is part of the contingency that we need to do, because if a mobile tower goes down, telephone communications down, we need something. The fleet small plant area will hold 18 radios just as a backup unit. We'll have an extra 5 as what we call a boot stock for interoperable changeability. But having an extra 100 on site would probably, wouldn't be cost effective. But if we needed to, we could rally 200 radios and deploy them if we needed to be there. The ability of Motorola to supply additional units and have them pre-programmed and all the rest of it, again, would be something that would come under GWN's purview, where they would then make the direction to say, can you make these units available? Not so much us, but if we wanted to help out, we certainly could. And it would be a case of whoever's looking after that radio channel and the command centre would say, go to this operability, or they'll create an interoperable channel for us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gates.
Sorry, my final question. The upfront cost in 21-22 of nearly $3 million, is that for the capital equipment? Is that why it's so much greater than the following 6 years?
Exactly right. So there's a replacement cost that's going to come up front. Part of the reason we're here today is to get the approval to go forward to get the exact quotation that's needed. As of an hour before I got here, we'd finalised the actual numbers that we need. So we're waiting to send that with approval to get that number. $3 million is what has been estimated based on our original sourcing analysis. I could say that number may drop a little bit along the way, given that we went for best case or worst case scenario in this instance.
Yep.
But then, the capital outlay would then make the operational costs a lot less over the time.
Okay, happy to move the item.
Yeah, Councillor Pauline Young.
Thanks, and through the chair. So we reached the end of our 6 years and 11 months. Where to? What's the where to after that?
Yes, so part of what we're thinking about doing, part of what we're thinking about doing is again waiting to come to that 5-year mark, and then start to look at what our options are there. Give us a little bit more time, given that we caught a little bit behind the ball with this particular one.
Yep.
We'd like to make sure that we're okay across that.
Okay, beautiful. Thanks.
Any other councillor questions? Thank you, Darren. Well played. Move Councillor Gates. I'm happy to second it. All in favour? Carried unanimously.
New Year stuff.
Sorry to take your star away from you, so we'll give it back to you. 6.5, the proposed amendment of community grants and discretionary funds policy. I reckon we got Julie. And we get a bonus Nikki. Julie, are you coming out? Yep. Four.
Never mind, next time.
Who would like to lead us off? Nobody? Councillor McDonald, did you have a question about 6.5?
It's on page 87. The acquittal requirements. I don't know if it should go to the councillor. Page 87. 87.
So these are the ones that are currently streaming towards Matt, who's doing an awesome job at the moment collating them. Matt could have at least smiled.
Couldn't
He
see
is
if he did.
smiling.
I can't see him.
it.
Behind his mask.
Yeah, that's better. So Councillor McDonald, is that what you are referring to?
The acquittal,
Yeah.
yeah.
So rather than being directed to the councillor, you think it should be directed to,
The officers.
Julie? So on page 87, under acquittal requirements, funding recipients who receive allocations must provide a written acquittal to the councillor.
That would come back into the program, so we could change that, that won't be a problem, we can change that to the council,
Yep.
and we'd keep it on file, that way that we put it against others before this thing.
I have a question too.
Councillor Gates.
Somewhere in the report, and I can't find where I read it now, it mentioned a change in terms of schools being suggested last time, but that was purely in relation to capital works within schools, wasn't it? That suggestion was made, not in regards to events or trophies, but purely capital works on state government land, that applications. That was in the whole of city program, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Gates, I was of the understanding, and I may be obviously incorrect, but that the focus was on the fact that schools are divisionally based and therefore they don't provide that whole of city benefit that the community grants or what's being proposed to be renamed Citywide Grants Program aims to achieve.
Correct. I agree with you in that regard. I just wanted to be sure that schools were still eligible under the discretionary grants program for,
Correct.
yeah.
Yes.
And when they were applying for the whole of city funding, it was for very large amounts in my experience. That was for a large capital project. So that was what we felt was also not warranted on state government land through this program. So that's been removed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillors, any other questions?
Just checking to see if that's going to be changed.
The bit, which bit?
The bit acquittal to the councillor.
Yeah, Julie said that it would be. So rather than councillor, it'll just say council. On page 80, there's a reference to a cap for in-kind grants to community organisations and proposed to cap 2 in-kind grants per community organisation per year. And I think that this in part is to pick up, for example, the printing of the community things like the neighbourhood watch flyers. Is that correct? So to my view is that should be 4 rather than 2 because, it's designed so that we can facilitate engagement with those small community groups. But Neighbourhood Watch, for example, generally do 4 meetings a year. So I think that the 2 needs to be 4. So on page 80, at the top paragraph, and so my understanding is if we made it 4 rather than 2, and each request could be up to $250 of printing. Yeah, Nikki?
My only question is really when you run those figures with the cap of the pages, with the in-kind grants being 1,500 pages over 4 requests per year, that's a lot of paper for every, like, I'm just thinking in terms of if every community organisation came and requested that there's some significant, quite frankly, some significant paper involved.
Yeah, so like, I mean, and that also has to work in conjunction with the print office and their availability. So like, I mean, so they have a priority, which I think we've all experienced as well, where they've got big agendas that are needed to be printed. They take a priority, but for me, it's not to pick up the photocopying for every community group that we represent. It's to just make it somewhat easier to do the smaller things that actually do make a difference to some of those groups. So I think that if the policy was to say 4 times a year up to 250, and next time we need to look at it, we'll actually at least have an idea of whether or not it's been used sparingly or abused. And my guess is the print room would be the first port of call to the director to say, can you tell them to stop doing that? And then we'll have to deal with it from there. Councillor Gates.
I have a concern with that. I think that I don't think it's fair or reasonable to expect that 14 of us could channel that level and volume of printing that might be possible. For me, it's always worked fine in saying to them, sorry, we don't do this, but your state representative is more than happy to do it for you. I have never had a problem with doing that. I know that my office has prepared the Anzac Day flyers for Anzac Day services, but that's just a once a year, and we've received an estimate for those works and paid for them. I don't know how we would measure the $250. What does that relate to, $250 worth of printing?
Well, I did get the cost from the print room councillor, and it really depends on what type of printing they're doing in terms of cost. But there's, so as an example, a double-sided, like a flyer quality print, coloured print, double-sided is about, I think, $1, just over $1 per print job. But that's probably at the upper level of what is requested to be printed. I'm not privy to the type of requests that go through.
So I would still feel that groups should apply for a level of funding at this time of year when we're assessing our discretionary grants if they need assistance to that level, and perhaps we can get approval or we can consider that any additional printing be handled within the divisional office. I mean,
so the divisional offices aren't able to print after a certain amount. So I can understand your concern. I just disagree with you. So I, for example, have Oxenford Neighbourhood Watch, who have 1,500 to 1,800 two-sided flyers that they like to print and then they distribute them. I very much question the $1 a copy thing.
Does the state member help?
The state member is too busy being on the side of the road waving at cars, so no, he doesn't. But to me, it's insanely frustrating when you have been able to help groups in the past and then have to go through I'm going to say a ridiculous number of hoops just to deliver the same thing again. So to me, it's about what is the dollar amount that causes an issue in terms of the budget, and what's the dollar amount that actually allows us to do the smaller things easily. You know, so
we've just got to multiply it by 14 and assess what the impacts are. Well, yeah, what the impacts are on the staffing of the print room that's still doing paper agendas.
Yeah, and if we direct it through to community groups having to do grant applications for $300 or $400, we end up wasting a whole lot of staff time processing those community grant applications for $300 or $400.
But just once a year. Just once a year.
There's got to be a balance.
I disagree.
That's okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair.
I don't have a lot of asks through my divisional office for printing, but I do have a local neighbourhood watch group that doesn't have a lot of funding, and we do 4 a year for them, and it's quite minimal. But just recently, the state member has offered to do some printing for them, so we're going. You know, she'll do one, I'll do one. We're sort of sharing it, but we don't. I never send anything to the print room. It's just divisional office, and it's just a local neighbourhood watch. So I'm just wondering, really, how exhaustive, you know, it would be for 14 of us. Because if we're all sort of similar to you and I, it's not. I don't think it's going to be an impasse to have 4 a year, and but not print room.
13. Councillors, does anybody else have any ideas or thoughts on?
I'd leave it at 2.
I'm going to suggest 4. I'll take your 2 and that'll give me 4.
4 14s.
Do we have any other questions in regards to?
Some of us have more than one neighbourhood watch group too.
I know, we've got 5.
Speaks for itself.
Yeah, working hard for our community, protecting people's lifestyles. It's really important.
It's a
Councillor
state
Gates.
initiative through the police.
It's just one example. It's just
yeah,
one example.
let's do it all. Let the ratepayers pay for everything. Not right.
Who are you with, Councillor Patterson?
I'm with Councillor Gates, Councillor Owen Jones. The way I look at this, yeah, I will go through this afterwards, and if we get 4 in, I'll work out exactly how much money and stuff can I get for my community groups, and then I'll go out and I'll advertise it to them, and I'll get as much as I possibly can. So if you don't want me to do that, then you're probably best keeping it at 2.
So I think we've all probably got responsibilities to be well behaved, you know. Councillor Taylor.
Can I just clarify, is that 2 per community organisation, or is that 2 totally, or 4 for the office per organisation?
Right, so we know that Councillor Gates and Councillor Patterson have a position. Does anybody else have a view?
How many you got?
Yeah, you're well behaved. Yeah.
Oh, you can't vote.
Councillor Young?
I've got state members that do it all.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you're just lucky.
In saying that, sorry, through the chair, we do Anzac Day and VJ Day for them, and the little lady brings in a USB, and we do that the rest of the time. It's either Mr. Hart or Mr. Stevens.
Are they still state members?
I don't know. I don't know if they're still state members or whether they're on holidays or they're in New South Wales or whatever, but yeah. I don't know about you, Dad. Do they?
Look, you know, I mean, I'll go for the 4. It's there if it's needed.
Yeah.
3. Do I hear 3? Can we land unanimously at 3?
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Just an added thing. I do have a column in that Neighbourhood Watch newsletter.
That's a conflict. I hope it's on your register.
It's providing a service to the community.
Self-promotion, actually.
Yes, Councillor Tozer.
So the original officer's recommendation talks about delegating to the CEO in-kind grants up to a value of $250. That's what we're talking about here, lifting that from 2 to 4 per year. Is that correct? How is it proposed that a council laws office will quantify that in order to meet their obligations? How do we, if you don't mind me asking?
So
Sorry, through the chair. So we have the costings per sheet or for tube stock. So how that would work in practice is your divisional office would receive a request for, so say I'm the Red Cross, I get 2 requests per year to your divisional office. My first request is for printing up to with a cap of 1,500 pages, which is 3 reams of paper, costed at that cost. Provided that doesn't exceed $250, it can just be approved under delegation, and that practically in the background is just a journaling of your divisional allocation funds to the print room.
So, does this community grants, will that allocation of funds be drawn down from the 36,000? So it's just from a print room allocation, which is our office's printing allocation?
It's just the limits prescribed under this policy. So if it doesn't exceed 1,500 pages...
It doesn't come off any...
No, it'll come just off your... It may be that it's another control that's created just for in-kind, but depending on the type of application it is, it might be a community event application, it can just come from that control.
So, Mr Chair, can I just add to that? It is part of the divisional allocation suite. So you know how there's $750,000 per year. Of that, there's $36,000 for your discretionary grants.
Yes.
It's proposed that it will be potentially another control under the $750,000. So you might want to put in $1,000 in there to use for printing, stationery, and these.
Right. So this is effectively this is the value of this printing that I might do for a neighbourhood watch still comes off the $750,000 allocation, and there's no other way around that. It's not coming from some whole of city printing budget. It's still coming out of the $750,000 local area works allocation for local projects, local community groups, local things.
So if Councillor Patterson allocated $5,000 in her 750 towards printing, and she promoted to all of her community groups, once she got to $5,000, she's spent the budget and doesn't have the ability to print anything more.
Mr Chair, we'd see that as being able to be topped up like your controls, like just like you move between your controls and top it up during the year.
You can lift it if you want.
That's a priority for you to be able to move between controls, you'd be able to do.
But just to follow up on my question, that will still be subject to end of financial year reporting. We're still going to, if we end up spending $50,000 on printing for community groups, which might be something that an individual divisional councillor wants to do because they see that has community value to that, that'll be something that is published as part of that $750,000 disclosure.
Yeah, and it's a community grant, so it has to come reported in the annual report.
So it's also reported in the annual report as a community grant. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Gates.
I'm not going to do any
I
printing.
don't understand how we get around that not being discretionary funding at all. But how does this also impact on the expenses reimbursement policy where we are stipulated an amount that we are able to use for printing and stationery?
So this is allocated as a community grant and it's by application. So the part that we're trying to emphasise here is that we'll still have a form and a template available on the website for which these community groups are applying for these grants, and then they're assessed against the criteria which we said what's it being used for, what's the purpose, stuff like that. So they're still assessed that way, whereas the expenses reimbursement is for council of business.
So what if people don't apply at this time of year in the advertised period? They're not able to have this access to those funds if it's a community grant?
Through the chair, we actually saw this program as a rolling program, which means it's available all year, so they can apply at any time.
As opposed to every other grant that we do that has a stipulated and advertised timeframe.
There's a few others that also have a rolling program, such as this community events program. They can apply at any time for that. So there's a few programs that are open for application.
Events I get. I don't get this when it's a grant of that requires funding.
And so does this also pick up, Lions Club do an annual citizenship ceremony. We try to give them plants each year, and each year it's a drama. Does that enable this to also pick that up as well as something being able to be done under a delegation?
Yes, the tube stop, yes.
We had legal advice on this, please, because it's discretionary. There's no way it's not discretionary in my view, And I want to know, have we had this cleared in terms of the legislation that was introduced after Belcara?
Cherie, are you with us?
Hello, yes, I am.
Did you hear Councillor Gates's question?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The problem is I can't hear Julie at all because I'm guessing she's not in front of a mic.
She will be
So I'm
in
missing
just a moment.
Right.
So you just got to hear me. How lucky.
Was very lucky, yes.
Do you want to talk about the legal advice?
So my question, Cherie, was whether or not we have had legal advice, because I can't understand how this is not discretionary funding, and I don't want to fall foul of the legislation and its intent that was introduced post-Belcara.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hamish Kittle and my team has had a look through the report and has been assisting with some of the draft policies. But I don't think that particular issue has been looked at, and there were a couple of other issues raised earlier that I wouldn't mind having a closer look at before full council, unless Julie can confirm that they were issues actually put to Hamish specifically and that he's provided advice on.
Through the chair, Cherie, these were discussed with Hamish because it's set up the same way as the community events grants, which is a rolling program and by application on the website, and it's decided by delegation. And it's got a set criteria that we can make those decisions on behalf of the councillors.
Right. What I might do, Councillor Gates, is I'll just have a chat to Hamish before full council and we'll confirm something back to you in writing.
And
Thanks,
so,
Cherie.
Cherie, could I just ask, so the council law generally at the setting of the budget allocates some of the $750,000 to a control account, and then this is a mechanism to enable the city officers to under delegated authority authorise payment to particular groups from that control account. And once that control account is spent, it would need another decision of council to top it back up. Is that?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Thank you, Cherie.
Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Just another question, Mr. Chair, in regards to if some of the groups want printing done and they bring their own paper, how does that sit?
So were they printing it in your office or in the print room? So I don't think
No,
the print
in the office.
I don't think the print room's going to accept it as.
No, in office.
So I think the broader question isn't necessary. So the printing that's done in your office now, you use your card to identify yourself as the printer, and then I'm assuming that there's a consumable charge that the city receives, which assumes, probably quite correctly, that anything that's printed in the printer, it consumes paper and ink, not just ink. So I'm assuming if somebody was to bring us 2 reams of paper, which is of an inferior quality to the paper that we print, and we send it through a copier and it causes a damage or an issue to the copier, we probably have a service arrangement issue.
That's correct. So from a printing perspective, we pay for the machines and then a cost per use as well. And there are assumptions in terms of the warranties on those.
Does that answer?
I'm just putting the question out there because I know that there are community groups that have asked to previously, if they supply the paper, could we print them?
So, Kath, as the acting director, is there a position that the city has in regards to paper and being able to use the printers to print?
I'll take it on notice, but I would assume we certainly have looked at what type of paper that we use. That's obviously part of what the evaluation was. I can't say whether specific paper types are clarified within the contract, but I would expect those things have been thought through.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Barton-Lobson.
Can I get a clarification at the moment? If a community organisation comes to us now and we print it in our office, are we allowed to do that, or does this capture that scenario at the moment?
So I think the first question is what would be the volume that you print? Because my understanding is there's a hard limit as to what the officers should print internally. So, from memory, it's 100 or something like that. So if you're printing more than 100 somethings, you might have an issue, and then that's aside from the issue that you might have an issue just printing 100 somethings.
So at the moment we can print up to about 100 in our office at this present time.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the first part of the...
We're not permitted to print, in my understanding, at the moment, we're not permitted to do photocopying for community groups.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, and that's my understanding too.
Understanding of
Yeah.
what
So
is
there's two parts of the question. The first part of the question is what is the volume that an office can print, and I'm assuming that there's a register of numbers and it attaches to people. And then the secondly was what is the purpose of that printing? And that's the more problematic issue.
Correct.
That it wouldn't it be nice if you could resolve by adding some words. Councillor Barton-Lobson.
Thanks, Chair. So just curious how this would work in future, because we kept using the word apply. My understanding currently for your neighbourhood watch groups, they'd email you saying, are you able to print this for us? And would that be printed in the office or the print house?
So at present, and we'll continue to use the neighbourhood watch example, so traditionally we have been able to direct that to the print room and the print room prints it. Okay, and then there's a charge that they raise, and as has in recent times, that's something that's been authorised by Ross, because he ultimately looks after the staff that man our council offices, and that's where we're at the moment.
And at the moment, that charge comes from local area works?
Correct.
Okay. And for this one, what would constitute an application?
Through you, Mr Chair, we would see like a simple online application. So should you get an email, your office staff, you can pretty much work it the way you would like to work it. So you may choose to enter those details into the online form yourself and send that off for approval, or you might just refer the organisations through to the website themselves to complete that form.
Okay, so there'd be a website with forms for printing?
Yes, it would be. It'd be the same kind of setup as we've got for the other kind of community event grants at the moment.
Okay. Would that be called in-kind grants, or would that be called printing?
No, in-kind grants.
Okay.
Because it's not just printing; it may be other things. For example,
So
the tube stock or
small plant, tube stock,
Room hire.
coffee, room hire. Okay. Okay.
Does any other questions, councillors? Excellent. I'm going to have a go at moving that with the change from 2 to 4, and if I can get a seconder, I might speak to it, and if I can't get a seconder, I'm assuming that somebody else will move something. Councillor Taylor. Did you just second it, Councillor Taylor? Excellent. To me, the minor change is about making it easier to have a paper trail of the in-kind contributions that make our task at supporting community through a variety of different community organisations easier rather than harder. It still has accountability in regards to the allocation of funds and resources, and provided that the advice that Hamish has provided in regards to the original preparation of the report remains true. I think that it's something that we can live with a minor adjustment if it helps get us better outcomes. Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I won't be supporting the motion today. I'll be waiting for the advice from the city solicitor, because I'm just concerned that in-kind contributions have a cost associated with them, and I want to be certain that the intent of the state's legislation, where they capped the amounts that we could donate to community groups, is being adhered to. So I may change my position on Tuesday at full council if the clearance to do so is provided, but in the interim, I can't support that change.
Anybody else would like to speak for or against? Excellent. Well, Councillor Tozer, just in time.
That's all right. No, I think they seem like little contributions, but I think what gives me some, and I can't vote on it today, but I think what gives me some satisfaction and certainty about the matter is that if we choose as councillors to determine that the community interest in our division is best served by printing for a community group or providing tube stock, then we're able to do that up to a certain reasonable limit, and it's also published for people to hold us to account. That transparency and that availability is very manageable at a divisional councillor level, and I think, I suppose I want to appreciate the officers that have gone to an effort of trying to manage the policy as best they can whilst actually enabling us to do things that previously were probably being asked of us and we were always saying no, and they've tried to accommodate that the best they can. My view in Division 9 is that I won't be utilising the allocation of $750,000 to print documentation or paraphernalia for community groups. I don't think that's a good... just have too many needs in the community and too many community events and other community engagement exercises that are more important than that, when there are other ways that those community groups can get printing if they can't afford to print their own paraphernalia or engage with their state member of parliament to do so. We probably need to have a frank and fearless conversation about the sustainability of their organisation. So that's all I have to say.
Anybody else? So I'll just close by using a rubbish example, and that is recently I was contacted by a service club who was looking to do effectively a second-hand book drive, and they sought from the city a used wheelie bin, and I wasn't able to provide them a used wheelie bin because it couldn't be accommodated. That to me is a really minor example of where in my view, the intent of the state legislation wasn't designed to deal with those type of things, and we should have a process to deal with that. And so with that, I'll close.
And can I just ask one more question, given you've raised a wheelie bin and introduced something new in your close?
Sure.
Thank you. Through you, was the intent of this policy and the change that's being proposed purely in relation to printing or to wheelie bins, to tube stock, to all manner of other approaches that we may get that are of a community benefit in our mind? I felt that it was purely in relation to printing, but was this extra capacity created so that we could do all those other things as well?
Through the chair, we have tried to restrict it this year, particularly when we introduced it to those ones that's listed in the policy, and it's in response to the requests we've been getting from the councillors. So these ones in particular, the things that have come up over the last 12 months that the councillors particularly are asking questions about, such as the printing and the tube stock. Should there be needs in the future for like wheelie bins and stuff like that, I think that we should revisit it. But the whole idea is that we don't want to spend extra amount of money trying to process these small requests from different areas of council and putting in processes. So I think it's step by step with this in-kind program, introduce it, see how it goes, and then review the listing and the funding.
Sorry, I didn't see the list, so it's my fault for not reading it properly. But I see it now, and I'd just be grateful for Cherie's input on that whole gamut, please.
So with Councillor Gates's final comments, we'll close. So all in favour? Against? It's gone down. So, Councillor Gates, would you like to have a crack at the foreshadowed recommendation, or would you like to remove the in-kind from that so that you are consistent?
I'll move the officer's recommendation until we get the legal advice. And I think, mate, that halves what we were just looking at. I'm still not 100% confident that Cherie's advice will allow me to support the recommendation at full council. But in the interim, because there's nothing to be lost, I'll meet you halfway and I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Would anybody like to second Councillor Gates? Councillor Pauline Young? Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Gates? Excellent. I'll move an amendment. So all in favour? Carried. So no, Councillor Gates we just carried the officer's recommendation.
That's my fault. I haven't included your bit because I moved the officer's recommendation. It'll change at full council anyway, Dave. Sorry, I didn't think. I agree. No, it's wrong.
So the acquittal isn't coming to the councillors.
No, that's an error in there.
It's coming to the officers.
We never get the acquittals.
Yeah, but in the policy.
I see what you mean, and it was a good pickup. We don't want them.
Yeah.
What's that? The officer's recommendation that we followed did.
Get up?
Yeah.
Just bringing that up, if that's, give us a couple of minutes.
I would have just said
Just cut and paste that and put it together.
Councillor Pauline Young. So Nikki, are you staying for Swell? Yep.
thank you.
Yeah.
I don't, you might just want to stay, it's the last one.
With that,
so.
I just noticed.
Oh, you can stay there if you want. And carried. Julie, did you circulate the missing? Thank you.
That's enclosed.
Yep. What's that? Are you there, Cherie?
Yes.
We're just about to go into a closed session to chat about Swell. And I'm happy to move that because the reason is it'll involve the budget.
Yes.
Um,
I think that was the reason
Yep.
proposed in the report.
Thank you.
I'm comfortable with that.
And Councillor Gates is going to second that. And we're all going to vote, all in favour of going to closed, and we are now in closed. So I'm happy to move the item, and let's see if I can get a seconder. Anybody like to second it? Councillor Taylor, on fire today. Councillors all in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, are there any general business items? Sorry, sorry, Councillor Gates, I thought we were there. Yeah.
No, that's audit committee.
Councillor Young, you're more than welcome to move the entire audit committee agenda if that's what you would like.
I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, not another document to read.
So did you want to move item 9 of the audit committee? So,
Oh, that's
so
Monday.
20,
Plenty of
20
time.
past, and we're closed.
Thank you.
You are welcome.